Okay, so I see a couple people trickling in, but we'll go ahead and get started for the time being and at least do some intros. So first of all, hello everyone. Really appreciate everyone attending. Quick webinar about hybrid work, work from home, security and cybersecurity. Um, just to get things started, just going to do quick intros. Drew, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, sure thing. So my name is Drew Anderson. I've been working at CNWR now for just over a year. And my job is I'm a systems administrator. So that's just a really fancy way to say that when you call in, I'm going to be the first line of defense when answering your questions or helping you with your problems. All right, that's all I have. Matt, you want to go?
All right, so my title is Director of Managed Services. What that really boils down to is I've probably talked to, if you're a partner, every single one of you on a day-to-day basis in some form in the past 7 to 8 years. I lead the MSP department, provide solutions and implement them and make sure we're doing right by our partners at all times. So um, I'm going to hand this over to Drew to get things started, and he'll mention some things about the webinar formalities like Q&A and such.
Yeah, sure thing. So before we tell you anything, we wanted to let you know that if you have any questions for us as we're going through our content today, feel free to drop them in the chat. At the end of the discussion, we're going to have a Q&A panel where we're going to touch on any questions that come in. So let's get right into it. We want to talk to you today about best practices when it comes to working from home or working remotely. We also want to help you develop a work from home or bring your own device policy and walk you through what that looks like and offer a few different solutions that you can implement to keep your data and your company data safe. So last year, we saw a dramatic increase in users moving their offices to their homes due to COVID-19. And while the technology that we use every day gave a lot of people the ability to do this relatively easily, we also saw an increase in people who just generally had a more difficult time and who weren't prepared for making that transition. And we also saw an increase in security vulnerabilities as well. And unless you're like us and you already had your house set up for working from home, making this transition could have been all the more difficult for you. On top of making this transition, chances are you didn't have the same security measures set up at home that your company did for your data. But before we get ahead of ourselves and dive into our talk, we wanted to ask you what your work from home setup looks like on a daily basis. So, what does your office look like? What kinds of devices are you using? Are you using an iPad or a laptop or a desktop? What kind of software are you using? And if you'd like, you can drop that in the chat and we'll take a look. I know for me, I have a 2 monitor setup at home. I have a little camera sitting on top of my computer. My dog is usually sitting at my feet with me while I'm working too. I think Matt has pour over coffee within arm's reach at any given time.
Yep, I got pour over coffee. I have 4 screens, so it looks like I'm something straight out of the Matrix. But yeah, I mean, the reality is that while we have this set up, and we've pretty much always had this set up, a lot of our partners and their employees have not had that. So if you mind, I'm just going to go ahead and go right into next thing here. So what is hybrid work and what does it look like? Um, you know, when everyone was going to move from home, I think everyone had this great plan of what their environment would look like, what their office space would look like, and it probably looked something like this, or at least you hoped it would. You were going to carve out that space in the entry room or whatever for your work equipment, and have a great place to focus on getting the job done. But the reality is that it tends to look like this. Employees are a lot more casual with their workspace. With that, in general, comes less physical security, as well as a question of, is it okay for employees to use their home devices to connect to work resources? And I'd say at least 50% of the time, we're seeing that people are trying to use personal devices to connect to work resources initially until we kind of break this down to them. So I'm going to hand this over to Drew so that he can kind of explain why that's an issue, and then we'll get into, how do we solve that for you?
Yeah. So, how secure is your home network? And unfortunately, the answer is pretty short. Chances are it's probably not very secure. The main issue with working from home is that a lot of people want to use their personal devices, as Matt mentioned. And while we do have the ability to set you up with your personal devices so that you can work from home, there also comes a level of preparedness that we need to incorporate to make sure that we're keeping your data and your company data safe. So this is one of the big talking points that we would like for you to walk away with today. Really, the purpose is to the purpose of today is to ultimately lead you in the direction of creating a bring your own device or a work from home policy for your company. If you don't have one of those already, then let this be the indicator that you need to create one. If that's not something that you know how to do or that sounds super intimidating, reach out to us and we would love to help you create that. That is what we are here for. So, why is this so important? Why is it essential for us to create a work from home policy or a bring your own device policy for your business? While your work devices are generally covered by monitoring software, antivirus, password protection, and an IT department to back all of that up, your personal devices in your home network most likely have not gone through that level of scrutiny to assure that everything you're doing and sharing on them are safe. So, just as an example, a lot of times people will use default passwords on their home routers. So, like I use AT&T for example, and when they dropped off the modem at my house, they just gave me a little piece of paper with the SSID and the password on it. And if you don't go through and actually change that, or you don't create separate networks for different people to use, then anybody who's ever been on your network is going to have access to your stuff. And that's not good, especially if you have company data now at home as opposed to just your personal data. Um, Even something as simple as locking your screen on your laptop is pivotal in keeping your data safe. And that's something that we implement on the devices that we monitor on a day to day basis. Those are just some of the minor details that we like to pay attention to make sure that we're setting you up for success and keeping your data and your company data safe and secure. And I get it. In a perfect world, it would be super nice if we could just trust that every employee who's working from home has set up their home network and all of the devices that they're going to be using to to be safe and secure. But unfortunately, taking people at their word with their personal devices just doesn't cut it when you're trying to keep your data safe. Personal devices are convenient, but they aren't meant to be on a corporate network where security standards are much higher. And I should also mention too that your employees are not malicious. Data loss is very rarely ever intentional, and if it is, we would be having a different discussion. But we're going to assume the best of people here and say that nobody, decides that they're going to wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I want to send out an email today to all of our clients with data that none of them are supposed to see, or I'm going to download ransomware that's going to completely ruin our network at the office. Like nobody is going to do that on purpose, but unfortunately, it's just a fact that it's going to happen. And putting together a bring your own device policy and a work from home policy will help you effectively recover from that a lot easier than if you didn't have that implemented before. The other thing that we've noticed over the last year is that phishing attempts have become much more common. And really, this is just due to geographical proximity, or I mean, really, used big fancy words there. It's really me just looking over the cubicle and saying, "Hey, Susie, did you send me this weird email? Is this from you?" And being able to do that while at home is a lot more difficult unless you're sitting in a Zoom call or sitting in a Teams call. Um, so at this point, we've obviously presented a lot of the doom and gloom, but what we'd like to discuss next are some of the actual solutions that we can offer to help you implement a better bring your own device or work from home policy for your business. So that leads us into 2FA and MFA. So what are 2FA and MFA? These terms are generally used interchangeably, but they accomplish the same purpose for the most part. So 2FA stands for two-factor authentication, and MFA stands for multi-factor authentication. So essentially what those are just another layer of security that attaches your login credentials for your account to another physical device or to your email account. So essentially when you enter your password into an account or a website, 2FA or MFA will trigger a notification prompting you for a code that only you have access to. 2FA and MFA are the act of incorporating security with something you have, with something you know. And I'll say that again. 2FA and MFA are the act of incorporating account security with something you have, with something you know. So just as an example, on the screen here, I put a picture of a computer and I put a picture of your phone. So when you go to log into an email account, an example of that would be that your phone prompts you to log into that account. So in a regular instance, when you go to sign into your email, for example, normally it just asks you for an email and it'll ask you for a password. And the reason that this is considered to be an incomplete form of security now is because anybody has the ability to learn your password. And plus, if you use the same password for all of your accounts, then whoever gains access to that account is also going to have access to all of your other accounts and all of your other information as well. So for me personally, when I go to sign into my email, for example, I will get a notification on my phone that will ask me to approve that sign in. And because I specifically have an iPhone, it will use Face ID and it will look at my face and actually make sure that it's me who's approving the sign in. And then it logs me into my account back on my computer. So 2FA and MFA are super important to get set up for every account that you can. So what happens if someone gets my password and I don't have 2FA or MFA enabled? Just as a couple quick examples, if you're an accountant, then somebody has access to all of your bank statements or the bank statements for your company. If you're in HR, then someone has access to your employee list, all of their personal information, their email accounts. That also then gives them the ability to contact them basically as a bad actor and try to get information from them. If you're HIPAA encumbered, then all of your patient's medical records are up for grabs. So the reason that we want to implement 2FA and MFA is to ensure that even if somebody gets your password, they aren't going to have access to your account because they don't have your, physical phone, or they don't have access to the device that you have it set up on. And if you're interested in learning more about this, Jason and I did a webinar a couple months ago about phishing, and I say phishing with a PH, not casting the real phishing. But we did a webinar about phishing where we talked more in depth about this topic. And Jason actually had a really cool live demo where he showed us just how easy it is for hackers to get our password as well. So really the biggest thing that I want you to take away from this section of the talk is that two-factor authentication should be enabled on every account that you have the ability to enable it on. And I'll say it one more time. Two-factor authentication should be enabled on every account you have the ability to enable it on. So let's take a look at some of the tools that we use to implement that. So when I was mentioning before that when I sign into my email, I get a notification on my phone, I use Microsoft Authenticator specifically for that. And that's a really great tool that links to all of your Office 365 products. So highly recommend that. The one that we use internally at CNWR for all of our tools is called Duo. And again, that accomplishes the same purpose. So when I log into Screen Connect, which is the software we use to remote into your computer, or I get into Lab Tech, which is one of our monitoring tools that we use, I have to enter that code that it gives me into the sign-in to make sure it adding that layer of security so that nobody else has access to that in the event that somebody gained access to my account. So admittedly, when we talk about this, a lot of people will say, well, Drew, I have a hard enough time remembering my password. How are you going to incorporate this other tool that's going to give me another password? Like, that just sounds miserable. And my rebuttal to that is the extra 3 seconds that it takes you to sign into your account is far less inconvenient than the repercussions of compromising your personal data, your company data, or the data and the trust of your clients. So I'm going to toss it back over to Matt at this point, and he's going to tell us about remote access.
Yeah, for sure. So to touch on, what Drew said, we use 2FA and MFA internally for every single one of the tools that we use to provide support to our clients, as well as the tools that we provide to enable our clients for what I'm just going to talk about right now. So one of the things also that Drew mentioned is the difference in between personal devices and company-owned devices. And when COVID started, we really took a fine line in the sand that when we're enabling our partners for remote access, that's how we're going to differentiate how we set them up. So, because the reality is, a personal device looks like that. I mean, it's a family device that your kids might use, whereas a company device, I would hope your kids aren't using your company devices. So, and I have a 4-month-old. Luckily, she's not able to use a computer, so I don't have this problem. But the reality is I've had her in my office before doing work. So you really need to draw that line in the sand as to how much, what you're going to permit in terms of usage. So once again, why does it matter? Personal devices, unless you have a really clean bring your own device policy and you've already worked this out with all of your employees, then you're probably not going to be installing the enterprise level security software that is required to ensure that you're in compliance if you're a regulatory business. There's other things, from an employer and an employee perspective. How do you properly offboard an employee if you don't really know what they have that they're connecting to work assets with? And if you're an employee, how do you properly disconnect from work after hours if there's no distinction between what's work and what's personal use? That was a huge thing at the beginning of COVID. That you would just be sitting there and get an email at 7 p.m. and be like, well, I'm just going to respond right away. That's just not healthy for mental health. It's great for your business. You're getting all this work done, but there's just no border and people are getting burnt out so fast. So like I said, we followed 2 different methods for enabling our partners to connect. If a device is a company device, then we'll set them up with normally VPN access. So what that means is when you connect to the VPN, it acts like you're in the office. So if you have tools like a software phone on your computer that you use that connects to something actually physically in your office, or you need to connect to things like shared drives or printers in the office, then that's a great solution for you. But if a device is personal, then we'll set it up with remote access via a software. Like we provide software to our clients specifically so that they can connect to a work device if they have one that's sitting in the office. Or we can set you up with a virtual desktop. And I'll kind of hash that out a little bit later on down the road. But Windows Virtual Desktop is a great solution for that. So regardless, you always have to lock your screen. Don't let others use your device. And another reason why that matters is because in general, home PCs are not, normally they're not encrypted. So normally business devices, they're going to be encrypted. So if someone takes a hard drive, you at least can rest assured that it's going to be very hard for them to get the data off of it. But if you're sitting at home and maybe you're a HIPAA encumbered client, and you're downloading work documents that have patient information on them. And then, not that this happens all the time, and it's not like it's someone lurking outside of your door thinking, oh, well, I'm going to steal their data. It's just that laptops and computers and technology in general are valuable assets. So they're going to come and they might steal your laptop or steal your desktop. And then all of a sudden you have data leak and you have an issue where you have to declare an incident. And that could be a legal issue for your company. So that's a little bit of doom and gloom. Now it comes the time of, how can we do this? How can we make it better? So this is where we step in line to help you work from home, to enable you to work from home, and maybe look at reassessing your setup that you currently use. So, because the reality is we've always had work from home. This isn't something new. We've always been getting email on our phones, and most of us have devices that we take home, like a laptop. Um, if not even that, you have, your most of our clients have Office 365, or you have some sort of cloud service where you access company data that you didn't get to finish at work. So what's changed and why are we having these conversations? Well, there's a lot more focus on a remote work because of COVID, obviously. So sure, nothing has changed, but now people are realizing that there's possibly some insecurity there around consistent access that exists to work data. And there's really a lot of companies don't have monitoring around that. So you're not really sure what's going on. Employers are expecting a lot more output from work from home, as they basically the same level of output as they do in the office now. And that's just because of COVID. Before, it was an added bonus. If your employees were working from home, then awesome. Great for them. Pat them on the back. Or if you're an employee, you're like, well, I didn't get this thing finished. I'll just finish it at home tonight. It's no big deal. But now it's your job. It's your 9 to 5. So it's got to be just as you have to be able to do exactly the same things work from home as you can do in the office with no inhibitors there. So, and then another big thing is right at the start of COVID, again, a lot of bad actors came out trying to take advantage of this, massive migration out of the workplace to, deploy ransomware, take advantage of what Drew mentioned earlier with, it's way easier to phish people now because you can't do that over the cubicle holler about, hey, did you send this? This is kind of weird. I don't know if I want to download this PDF. So there's definitely some issues there. But what's the same? In general, these are still non-company devices. They're personal devices. Most companies, compliance hasn't changed. So if you have to comply to some regulatory authority there, be it HIPAA or PCI or whatever you have, that's still the same. It's not like those things have changed with work from home. And you still need to be able to do remote work in a way that's both secure but doesn't slow you down at all. So how are we enabling partners for that? Well, first of all, you can utilize a lot of existing services. Like I said, I'd say at least 90% of our clients use Office 365. And Office 365 is such a great way of enabling work from home. Right off the bat, if you aren't using Microsoft Teams to communicate internally, then that's something that should definitely be looked at. You already own these services. If you have Office 365, it's not like you have to pay additional for most of these. And what Drew said earlier is a great example of this. Instead of hollering over the cubicle, I can just message someone on Teams and say, hey, did you send this? And I mean, Drew, how often do we spend on Teams or Slack and Zoom?
I mean, every day, 9 to 5, because
Yeah,
we sit in a Zoom call all day, every day, so that we can communicate, so that we don't run into those same issues.
yeah. Because the last thing you want to do is start to be isolated, work from home. We like to all sit in a Zoom room and collaborate on what's going on, make sure that we're all staying up to date. And once again, SharePoint and OneDrive make it super easy to do that. Like Drew, I mean, we did this whole webinar in SharePoint. in
Yeah.
OneDrive just by collaborating on
Exclusive
Word. Yeah.
exclusively. Yeah, and it was cool because we were able to edit at the same time too. So instead of sending a file back and forth, we could sit on the Word document and type out our talk, and then we were also able to edit our own PowerPoint slides too. So it just made that process so much easier for us.
Yeah, for sure. And it's still really secure. You can set up a lot of rules. There's a lot of customization there. And if you're curious as to how to do this, we're happy to help you. Or if you have internal IT, I'm sure that this is something that they can look at. But Office 365 has, conditional access rules where you can, like, if it's connecting from somewhere that's not in the office, you can force the device to enter a 2FA code. Or if it's connecting from inside of the office, you can say, hey, you know what? Maybe you don't have to do 2FA today. You only have to do it like every 30 days. So there's a bunch of leniency and strict rules that you can apply. Maybe you just don't want anyone logging in from maybe you're a local small business and realistically no one's ever going to log in outside of North America, so you can just lock that down by geolocation. And that's doing those things are a great way to stay secure, because even if you have 2FA, all that kind of stuff, still some things can happen and you just need to be prepared for that. So another great example of the problem that moving to the cloud fixes is earlier we kind of mentioned, enforcing screensavers or, screen lock and timeouts. For some of you, your existing Office 365 licensing, you can apply policies to mobile devices to enforce that. Because, I mean, modern, or maybe now it's the legacy environment at work, everyone was using a server to apply policies to computers. And that's really the reason you had a server. It was like, in between printers, file shares, and your usernames and passwords, maybe that's all you use a server for. Then maybe it's time to look at moving away from a server and move to the cloud. And with people starting to work from home continuously, even after COVID, that's likely going to be a thing. So maybe we should have a conversation about making that move, because a lot of those policies, sharing files, all that stuff can be done in your Office 365 environment. So that's your existing services. So there are some new services. They existed before COVID, but they really took off once COVID started becoming more of a thing. And as I mentioned earlier, Windows Virtual Desktop. Windows Virtual Desktop has really been a game changer in working remotely. It allows you to use a virtual computer that's in the cloud to connect to your work resources in a very secure manner. It's all just by downloading an application and typing in your Office 365 credentials, so super easy. It does require some setup, but it's nothing that your IT partner can't handle. And the best part of it is you can really do it from any device, an iPad, an Android phone, even something like a hotel computer. If you're working from the road, you don't have to worry about, the security. You can just open up a web browser, go to a URL, type in your Office 365 credentials, and there you go. You're on a virtual computer and you have access to work resources. Another solution that we started to provide to our clients was there's a Cisco solution that is actually a physical appliance. And it's just a little box. You can take it home, you plug it into your home network, and it just automatically connects to your work network. So you don't even have to worry about a VPN. It just automatically VPNs for you. So this is great if you're using, a desk phone, or maybe you have a printer that needs to connect to work resources or a scanner of some sort. Environments where you have maybe more than just your one computer, this is great. And also it has the ability to do cellular backup. So if you're, doing a webinar and you don't want your internet to cut out, then you can utilize this to basically fail over to cellular if your internet service provider were to ever go away. So two great solutions. Um, Certain environments, one's going to be better than the other is the reality. So that's what we're here for, is to have a conversation about which one is better for your work environment and work culture. And we're happy to have that conversation for sure. So Next, continuous education. And this is really the big thing for security. Um, users are going to be your weakest link always. That's just how it is. So, but you can make them be your strongest. All you have to do is keep them up to date with what the modern threats are. Implementing things like awareness training, where maybe you have someone when they first get hired, they do an initial get up to speed on what the threats are in our environment. And then you have automated fake phishing attempts. And if anyone ever clicks on it, then they have to go through and do like a quick class. Doing that kind of stuff is going to keep your employees but more up to speed with the threats and modern day technology. But it's not just that. I mean, awareness training is great, but you really need to sit down and have, maybe a town hall discussion regarding other threats that are happening in the environment. Because yeah, there's just phishing, but there are a lot of other threats. I'd say, 90% of your issues are going to be phishing, but that 10% still exists, and it does matter. So you have to keep your user base up to speed on the threats of the modern day. So what it comes down to is we can help with all this. It's what we do day in and day out, and we love doing it and providing all these services for our partners. If any of these things sounded great to you and you're a current partner and you weren't aware that we were doing this, please reach out to us and we can help you get these things implemented. If you are not a current CNWR partner and these things sound great, same thing. Please reach out. Big three takeaways that we wanted to come away from this with was, as Drew said earlier, create that work from home, bring your own device policy so that you have a standard that all of your employees follow. Set up secure remote access in a standardized way for your entire workforce, and make sure it's what's right for you, and then continue to train users. That is so important. So I think that's the big three that I have to take away. What about you, Drew?
Yeah, like we said, if all of this was super confusing or super intimidating for you when we're throwing out all these acronyms with WVDs and MFAs and 2FAs and ABCs and 123s, we are acronym specialists and we really ultimately just want to help you do your job better. So if today was confusing, ask us questions and let us help you create a better work from home environment for your company.
Yeah.
And I think with that, we are going to move into our Q&A panel at this point. So like I mentioned before, if there were any questions that you had as we were going through this, now is the time. You can either drop that in the Q&A section or you can drop that in the chat. It looks like we have a couple
I got
questions
one.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it, Matt.
So someone asked, what can I do to make my own personal PC more secure? You want to take that one?
Yeah, of course. So right off the bat, if you are using a Windows machine, so Windows 10, there is a great bit of software that's already built into that called Windows Defender. And that's just something that you go into the settings and you click on security and you just make sure it's turned on. That's going to do a really great job of protecting you from viruses and ransomware. I believe there's a firewall setting in there as well that can be turned on. And it's a really great tool, and it's a really great starting point for anybody who's trying to be more secure. And the really great part of that is that it's not going to cost you anything extra. This is something that's already built into Windows that you can use right now. So I would encourage you, if you don't have that stuff turned on, go into your settings, type in security, and it will just pop right up in front of you and you can turn all that on.
Okay. I got another one. What kind of bandwidth do I need at home to be able to use remote access? Yeah, I'll take this one. So it really depends on the type of remote access. I mean, if you're using a personal device and you're connecting to a remote access via software or a Windows virtual desktop, then you don't need nearly as much bandwidth. I mean, you're still going to want modern days, you can easily get 100 down by like 5 up. And if that's confusing, please reach out to us, or drop a note in chat about by what it looks like. But yeah, when it becomes more of a problem is if you're using a VPN and maybe you have a software phone and you have your computer and you have another device that are all connected over the VPN and over your bandwidth to work resources in an office. That's when you need something more sufficient. And don't be led astray by that, that first big number, like I just said, that
Yes,
100 by 5. If your remote setup is like I just spoke about, then you're going to need more than 5 to really have a good experience,
that's
especially if you're
5
on a
uploads
Zoom video
specifically.
call. Yeah, yeah, 5 upload. Especially if you're on a Zoom call, because that Zoom call or that Microsoft Teams call is going to eat up bandwidth as well. I got another one here.
Go for it.
Do you have any recommendations for me as an employer as to how to handle custom home workstations? Is letting them use their home devices better, or should I provide them hardware? Um, I'll
It
take this.
Yeah,
Go
go for
for
it.
it.
Yeah, I'll take it. Sure thing. So let's start with the first part of that. As an employer, how do you handle customer home workstations? Is letting them use their home device better, or should I provide them with hardware? Again, it comes up to personal preference and what everybody else is most comfortable doing. Like we mentioned, setting up something like Screen Connect. Well, I'll tell you what we do. So if you're using a personal device, we set you up with what's called Screen Connect. And what that does is give you the ability to remote into your work PC, which is great. However, like Matt mentioned before, if you don't have the infrastructure at home to be able to support that, or you don't have the infrastructure at the office to support that, then that's going to be that's going to be a lot more difficult. I would then push you in the direction of getting a company-owned device and setting up a VPN. But even with that, there's cost associated with all of that as well. So I think you would need to take an inventory of what people are already using and what you have accessible, and kind of create a solution that way. And again, a lot of the solutions that we create are custom to our clients, and so that's something that we can actually help you work through. If you talk to us about what kind of stuff you have on site and what kind of devices people are using at home. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you answered that pretty well. Yeah, I mean, the thing with what we do for remote access from a personal device is that it does consume, like, it's going to use that work device in your actual work environment so that they can remote onto that. Someone said earlier in the chat, I use a laptop that I sit at the dining room table and I use remote PC. Yeah, I mean, that's basically the same thing. Our take on that is we use a specific solution that it's a business solution, and we provide it to our clients. uh, for me, the big thing is if you're going to use a type of software to remote into a work resource, it should probably be discussed internally with the business first, to make sure you're all using a standard setup. Because if you're not using a standard setup, then how do I, from a security perspective, make sure that, hey, this computer has like TeamViewer and Log Me In and Remote PC. Is it supposed to have all these things? I don't really know. So if you know what's supposed to be there, then it's a lot easier to stay secure. As well as make sure you put a password on it. That's a big thing that people don't often do. Set up a secure, strong password for
Enable
using that
2FA.
software. Yeah, yeah, and if it supports it, enable 2FA. Ours supports 2FA, so that's why. Yeah, we it's a requirement if you're going to use it. There's another one. Uh, I'm in the medical field. If I let my employees use their home PC, what issues can that cause with HIPAA?
Well, that's tough. So again, one of the things that you would need to be really intentional about is creating a work from home policy. And I think specifically with that, you would need to make sure that people aren't pulling documents that are supposed to be on the company-owned device. So specifically, like, if you're working in a doctor's office and there's an X-ray that you're looking at, you would want to make sure that that's only being accessed and saved, back centrally at your office. You want to make sure that people aren't downloading those kinds of things onto their personal devices, because what Matt mentioned before is this whole idea of data leak, right? So if we are downloading all this information and it's just going every which way, there's no way for you as a business or even us as an IT company to regulate where that data is going. So if that stuff just starts getting sent out, then there's no way of keeping it safe and keeping it secure. So I think it would be important, again, to create a policy, specifically if you're in the medical field, to say, hey, keep this data on this device and don't download it onto your personal computer. That was really the first thing that came to my mind. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a HIPAA encumbered client, and you're in that regulatory industry, then you really need to have a work from home policy and a bring your own device policy. And our personal take on that is that if you are going to let users use their own personal devices, then they have to basically, sign a form saying, with you using this device, you are going to allow us to install X, Y, and Z software, and do monitoring on a. Because the reality is if they're accessing PHI, the health information, then you need to make sure that it's secure. And if you don't have software on these devices, ensure like doing monitoring, then you can't honestly say that it's secure. And if you can't do that, then you're not in compliance, is our perspective. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's a big one. HIPAA is definitely one of the bigger ones that you really need to be careful with. And if you don't have those policies, they need to exist. So
Mhm.
I think that's all she wrote there. Um, does anyone else have any other questions? If not, I think we'll give a minute or two.
So just to go along with the whole work from home thing, I've had we've had clients and I've even had family members contact me just about things that pop up on their screen. And this is not a phishing attempt necessarily, but it's a browser extension that gets installed. And what happens is you'll be scrolling the web and, oh my gosh, contact Microsoft now. There's a virus on your computer and there's flashing lights and it's scary. And you want to get it off your screen. And so a lot of times what happens is people will call the number and whoever's on the other end of that number will remote into your computer. They can install access to your computer so that they can get onto it whenever they want. And that it just kind of snowballs into this really awful, messy situation. So the whole idea of, with the question with the medical field, or as an employer, how do I handle home workstations? Those are all things that you need to take into consideration. If that's not something that you're monitoring, people don't know what to do when they see that. So having that policy in place is super important, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we had that conversation, and really it's kind of scary because if you've let someone if you've let someone on your computer, then how can you be sure that they don't still have access to your computer after you get them off? And the reality is that you can't. And if you're going to bring a personal device into a company environment, then you should probably wipe the computer because you can't verify that. I don't know what's happened on your computer since you bought it between then and now. There's just too much of a risk there, and you need to make sure that your company data is secure. So yeah.
Well, that looks like all the questions that we're going to get for the day. Um,
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your time, guys. We really appreciate you, taking time out of your day to come hang out with us and listen to us gab about security. Like like we mentioned before, if there's anything that we can help you with, just reach out to us. That's what we're here for, and it's what we do. And we want to help you create these policies and make your work environment safer, more secure.
Yeah, if you have any questions, there's our information, how to contact us. Um, Feel free to jump on to cnwr.com, give us a call, send us an email. Anyway, we're happy to have these conversations whenever you'd like. So feel free to reach out. And yeah, I really appreciate everyone jumping on and watching the webinar.
Cool. And with that, we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, see ya.